Hey everyone, welcome back. It's good to see you all again, joining us for our continued education. And today we are glad to bring you scissor skills. We'll give a rundown of what we're going to be doing today and bring on our guests. Hey Nico, how's it going?
Hi, Roy. It's going good. How are you?
Good, good, good. What do you have going on there?
Well, I did hear you introduce this scissor skills class. I'm excited because we've been doing so much razor, 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 and even though that is a big part of our culture, scissors is equally as important to us. So I'm excited just to show you a scissor cut, which we'll break down in a few minutes or seconds, on Lacey. So if you can say hello to Lacey first. This is a friend of mine, so she was gracious enough to come over and allow us to use her hair. And she's the perfect model in that she's got really, really, really long layers at the moment to the point where it almost looks like it's one length, though it's not. But it has been a while that she's gotten her hair cut. And this worked out perfectly in terms of timing because she does have a color appointment later on this week. And I thought it's great. You actually need some more layers, some more framing, a little bit of length come off, and it'll be the colorist will be able to work the placement of the color around the new haircut. So with that said, just to kind of quickly summarize and recap for you, you can actually already see I went ahead and wet her hair down to buy time, but you can see the stuff that's starting to dry on its own. That's the stuff that needs to go. And because she likes her length, I'm not looking for it to be any more than like an inch and a half maximum. I mean, I'm really going to try and get just that inch off so that she can keep most of it, but an inch and a half based on the technique that we do, which I'll talk to you about once we get into it. The part that's going to change the biggest is this front face framing. If you see at the moment, again, it's pretty long. It's around here on her body. But what I want to do is bring it up to collarbone. So already you can see that that's going to be a big chunk that's going to come off. And for someone that's already so long, this is such a big change because it's going to behave so much more like a side swept fringe or a side swept layer. Plus her hair does curl quite a bit, especially in the front. So this stuff, even though we're going to collarbone, will naturally shorten up a little bit by the way that it curls. So I'm excited for that as well. Just to show you where the back currently lives, again, it's quite long. So we are looking to push her forward a little bit, see if we get more length out of you. You can again already see how light it looks on the very ends and how translucent that looks. So I'm looking to strengthen that. But the other part that I want to change is really give her more movement and layers through this crown part. Just because to me, again, it looks like it's all quite grown out and almost the illusion of one length. So I'm excited to alter that. Did I miss anything, friend?
No, it sounds like a really in-depth consultation. I love all of your explanations, and just to give some context for this class for those watching, is we wanted to develop a class called Scissor Skills that mimicked the way that we use the razor, in a way that you can also utilize the scissors. So either if the texture wasn't suitable for the razor, or if you had a client that didn't want the razor, or if you're a stylist that only uses a scissor, we wanted to cover all of our bases, and give stylists out there techniques that could mimic what we love about the razor, which is the softness, the seamless lines, and these techniques that you're going to be using will give you that softness.
So, friend, after I rinsed her down just with water, I did add a little bit of the Hairdresser's Invisible Oil Primer, mainly on those colored ends to help me detangle it. But because she's been sitting here for a few minutes, I wanted to go over it with prep, mainly from roots to midshaft this time. So the two primers are not really overlapping. They're actually placed at two separate parts on her head, just so that you know why I'm doing that.
Yeah, and sometimes that older hair, the hair that's either lightened from the sun or color, needs or can benefit from the 6 featherweight oils that are in Hairdresser's Invisible Oil Primer. It's a little Bumble and Bumble Repair Blow Dry.
Yes, one of my favorite cutting lotions because it does help to seal the cuticle down and retain moisture. So that way, as I'm working through the haircut, I don't have to re-wet it as much, But of course, that's based on the individual's porosity. I might have to re-wet Lacey's hair as I go on, but this will help to retain as much moisture as possible. And it does give the ends a really nice slip to it.
Nico, I love the way that you're utilizing repair blow dry. Most people think to only add that as the last step before the blow dry, but given all of your explanations, it's going to help detangle, soften, and keep the moisture. A little save the day fluid. So why save the day?
Because it's your favorite product.
That's true.
Just joking. After I put the repair blow dry, even though she does have, remember, HIO primer on those ends, repair blow dry, and now the save the day, it didn't feel like there was enough slip to it. So those, and you saw those ends before I started, they were already naturally drying on their own, and they're so dry that they just look so light. So the mixture, and I actually have never done that mixture before, but I'm really excited to play with it because I know that those two products together are only going to make it that much more easy to manage.
Yeah, one of the great things about Save the Day fluid is it really absorbs into the hair. It's not going to sit on top. You're not going to feel it. It does a great job of seeping in.
Do you have a specific part? It can be slightly off center, but do you try and stick to center, Lacey, or does it matter? Yeah, something about that cowlick does force it to go slightly off in that direction, but we'll work from the middle and try and keep it neutral. So
are you getting up for your length?
Yes, and I didn't mean to have keep hush hush, but I hadn't asked her about her part, and I was just having that conversation with her. What I noticed is that she's slightly off center, and she mentioned she has a really strong cowlick, which you can actually see there. It does jump up quite a lot already. So I'm going to try and stay as close to center to keep it neutral so that she can part it at center when she decides to, but that slightly off center part is not drastic enough for me to work off of it at the moment. Friend, one of the things I wanted to mention that I love how you brought up the scissor skills and how we like to kind of use it to mimic what the razor can do. For those of you that are joining us, or if you choose to watch this after the fact, this isn't, scissor skills 101 in a sense, in that I'm not going to do things in the very basic. Some of it might be borrowed a lot from what Vidal Sassoon introduced to us, and some of it I will also use in terms of what the razor has taught us. So it'll be a mixture of both. But I'm not going to go in and just create a very blocky aesthetic. I am looking for it to breathe and move and be able to have that soft result that the razor can give to the hair.
Sounds great.
I guess that's my disclaimer in case someone out there is watching and they're not like, what the hell is he doing, That's not how we use the scissors, or that's not how I was trained.
Well, let me talk a little bit about technique and what, Nico, while you're getting set up, do you have an idea whether you're going to be cutting this length blunt or you're going to be point cutting?
No, I definitely want to point cut to start to show you that idea of what we discussed, which is creating a soft line with a hard tool.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about that. As we mentioned, these techniques are meant to create softness. One way that we can create softness and a lived-in feel through the length is through point cutting. It may look a little different from the point cutting that you do after a blow dry to soften a layer. The point cutting that we are going to be doing is deep enough so that you can get some variation into the line and really kind of see that zigzag motion. For example, if the point cutting isn't deep enough, the end result kind of isn't strong enough to be a clean, blunt line. So we really want to exaggerate that movement and point deep into our length.
Brian, I think I'm going to have to spin you, Lacey, so we're just going to go all the way to the opposite side. And then Kelly, you have to tell me how okay, we're on screen, which I think we're okay, right?
That looks better. Nico, can you just, with her, looks like her right shoulder. Yes, there we go. Now we can see.
Okay. Let's start this one. So, really quickly, just to remind you guys, I talked about taking off about 1.5 inches in length, and that actually is perfect, but what I'm going to do with my next section is drop it slightly longer in order to not cut in the same position and to recut the same line, which it'll make more sense once I take my second section. But I'm just kind of showing you in terms of where I want that target length to live.
Beautiful.
Yeah, friend?
Yes. And I also want to encourage everyone that's watching live, if you have any questions or comments, throw them in the comments box and we'll answer them as we go. What I'm noticing about the way that Nico is angling his scissors to really get that deep picket fence effect is he's almost like if this were 12 o'clock, he's going in slightly at 11 o'clock and creating those points. And the end result, when he shakes it out, is a loose straight line.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that summary, friend. That's awesome. So, the size of the section at this point is definitely going to be based on comfort, but with this technique, it's also based on being able to see the guide underneath. Meaning, if I take too much hair and I hide that guide, then I can't see it, right? But if I take not enough hair and I point cut, then I might be creating a bit too much translucency where it doesn't need to exist. Now, that's the funny part about this approach, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cross it for a second because there's no room back there, is that even though when I introduced Lacey, I said her ends look translucent, they look a bit weak, they look a little dry, I want to create strength, I want to do all that, but I also don't want to go in and blunt it off so that it doesn't look boxy or blocky. So this technique, even though I am point cutting, still allows me to create strength by being so methodical in a sense about it. So because it's the scissors, I'm still creating a pretty blunt, jagged line. Now the depth of it, that's what's going to be important. You saw that the depth of my point cutting wasn't excessive a moment ago. And that's what's going to give it the strength. If her hair was thicker, I can actually point cut as deep as the length of these shears, and that's about 3 inches because these are 6-inch shears. So let's just assume that's half of that. So I'm not point cutting the maximum depth that the shears will allow. I'm point cutting based on the density that's in my fingers. That makes sense, right?
Absolutely makes sense. And we want to create that strength with movement. But you also have to take into consideration, which it sounds like you are, the model that you're cutting and her existing texture. So you don't want to create so much space that it looks weak. You still want a clean, straight line with movement.
So now the width of this section is just too long or broad for me to hold on to at the whole thing. So I'm splitting it. Even though I'm splitting it from the center, I'm also splitting that section in half. And I can see my guide from the opposite side a little bit here, which is nice. So just to kind of show you guys at this point, I'm looking for balance, right? This should look like it's a nice balanced line straight across. This corner is a little too long. Sometimes it's nice. All y'all have to do is just go back in without holding it and just freehand that little corner off if I wanted to.
Great. I love that you mentioned being mindful of your guide. We're putting in this bit of texture. As you drop down each section, you also want to make sure that you're not cutting into your previous guide. It's really meant to kind of Velcro in and mesh and not be recut.
Yeah, and let me actually elaborate on that. You can just barely see my guide under here, right? And the stuff that's above it is the stuff that needs to be cut. And you see how weak that stuff is. A lot of that stuff is also layering because of where it's coming from the head. Now, if I were to match this guide, I would just be recutting all of the stuff underneath. So what I'm doing is giving myself enough space based on where my fingers are, and then creating the new guide slightly below the previous one.
Wow, we can really see that very well. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah, and that's the meshing or the velcroing that you referred to is by letting each section slightly mesh on top of the previous. Oh, that's a nice little visual.
Looks
So I'm
great.
gonna have to. I apologize, friend. I don't have any room back there, so I have to cross the camera to get to the other side, which we generally don't do. But
That's fine.
gotta go. You know, I guess we can blame it on COVID. And I am giving it just like 1 or 2 more pumps of prep because those ends were so hard to stay damp. But if you notice, I'm really just getting the very ends, that a lot of that extra product that I'm applying is just getting cut off.
Great.
I'm just going to look at my balance really quickly to see how I'm doing. You know, this is pretty common for me. I have to, you know, it's always better to be longer than to be shorter, right? My right side, because of where I'm standing, I tend to lose the visual of it. But like I said, it's always better to have longer points than it is to, you know, have shorter points. So all I have to do is go back in here and very shallow trim the edges so that it feels balanced to the opposite side.
Nico, that looks really clean, really even, really straight. Nice job.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop the rest of it. You can see that I have about a quarter panel left to do in terms of what I haven't touched, but very little of it tends to reach. So there's no need for me to split this subsection in half.
And I love the way that you are combing the hair back past the shoulders instead of rounding through. So any existing layering through the front, no matter how grown out it is, it's not tricking you into rounding through your length. So it's nice to see you comb back behind the shoulders.
Nice. And at this point, because of what's left, I'm not dropping my section longer than the previous anymore. And if you notice, I'm very shallow with my point cutting now. Because, well, a couple of reasons. There's not enough substance for me to create a new section. It'll look too tenderly or too weak. And because of where I am, sorry, I see like one hair there. On the head, all of this is going to get cut when I end up layering it or when I end up doing the front. So at this point, I'm really just, I'll say, blending it into the perimeter line in case some of those hairs don't end up making it into my other subsections. And there's a good visual of what you just said, which is down and around and behind the shoulder. And you know, for whatever reason, this is actually a bit surprising. This side has a lot less hair to cut than the opposite side did. That might either be based on my sections. Maybe I didn't take the exact same section on both sides. That also just might be a lot of people tend to have one side of the head that is less dense than the other. And this might be Lacey's slightly less dense side. Or this is, you want to say something, friend?
No, I'm listening.
Oh, this is always a theory that sometimes holds true. And when it does hold true, I'm always like, yes. And when it doesn't, I'm like, oh, well. But do you sleep on one side of your head? And do you know which side, maybe? More. Yeah, see, so there you go. My theory held true. So she says she sleeps on this side, which means there might be more friction and it actually has less density. And it did show it was quite different on that side. Okay, let's actually take this off.
Your theory is proven.
I'm done with the length. Any questions? And look how strong. We'll actually show them the length really quickly. Look how much stronger it looks.
That looks fantastic.
Yeah, it still looks clean, but it's going to have a soft little variation once it air dries because of the fact that each section is slightly longer than the previous and has that, jagged, varied line to it. All right, let's actually go ahead and sit down here.
So what's next?
So now we're going to move on to the front. And what I want to do is section out a diagonal line. That slightly mimics the outline in her hairline. So this is diagonal, and so is the interior as well. Now, how far back I go is based on density and what I'm comfortable controlling. And this feels pretty good to me because she's going to have quite a big change again from where it currently is to where we're going. I want to start small in terms of the size of this section and work my way up. So there's that side. I might as well just take the opposite side to be ready to go here.
Your sections look like they are really following the head shape. I love the way that the hair just naturally falls there, which makes it easy to cut where it's going to lay.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. That's my goal. All right, so you can actually see this is a pretty good visual. Her recession is somewhere around here, and it naturally is like splitting in that area. Plus, there's less density. Even though I took the section diagonal back, there's less density below the recession than there is above the recession. So I'm actually going to treat this as a separate subsection from this side section. But because I'm standing on this side, I'm going to go ahead and just grab this opposite side. And I'll show you what I want to do. This actually feels like pretty dense hair, so I'm going to split this in half. And again, this is just so that I can control the outcome.
So now it looks like you've changed the angles of your scissors. We've gone from point cutting into the length to using the scissors with a freehand technique, using the back of the scissors to kind of walk your way down. Great.
Perfect. Thank you for that explanation and description. Now let's see where this landed. Oh, genius, right at your collarbone, like we talked about. So, I did.
Nailed it.
Yeah, totally. I did, when I pulled that section out, I did drop my elevation to slightly gauge where that length is and then pulled it back up. And again, remember, she gets really curly here. So once this air dries, it is going to be much shorter, which we did talk to her about. I said, we'll aim for collarbone, but it'll probably air dry somewhere mid-neck, which I think is perfect and I'm really excited about. So let me go ahead and finish off this little side before we do that opposite side. There's very little here to connect, but you can see that's where I ended my over-directed frame facing section, and this is what I have left to finish off. And because it's such a small amount, I actually could wait until I add a new section, but I'm just going to keep going in order to give myself a visual of that line. Oh, and I can stay here for this side.
Yeah, and I noticed as that second panel that you connected, you lowered your elevation to more where it lives on the body. And this first section seems to have a bit more elevation to create softness.
Yeah, exactly. Like I mentioned, this section has a lot more density to it, and I am looking to create softness. So the elevation and the over direction are automatically going to do that. Meaning I actually don't have to go in and take weight out of it just yet. I can. I'm not sure if I need to yet. But instead, I'm relying on all of this elevation and over direction to do that for me, to start to soften it and lighten it up. So just to show you, this is the angle that I just created, and then this is what I haven't touched yet, similar to the opposite side. And yes, you mentioned this already, but because this subsection is so much less dense, dropping my elevation is immediately going to create strength here. So
Nice.
that's the start of my front stuff, which again is such a big change from where she was and where she came in that I'm really excited for her to see this once it's completely done. So now that I'm more into the interior and I've moved past the round of her head, this section, I'm actually not going to play with any over direction. It's going to come straight forward. I can see the guide underneath from what I just created, and I'm just going to connect that. Just to show you where I am on the head, I'm probably at that point where we tend to get that radial parting from the top of the ear to the opposite side. But because of the amount of hair that just came off, and because remember she came in with such long, sorry, I just grabbed your mask off of you. It's okay. My combing is so aggressive. I'm actually going to take a third section, and it does travel behind that point, and see how much of this. Oh, it's such a small amount. Let me actually, yeah, I'm going to blend it in anyway, just since I took the section. I tend to do this a lot just so that I avoid having a heavy corner right over the shoulder. Where I take that third section. Go ahead, friend.
Yeah, and it truly is everything that grows forward. It looks like you just added just a slight bit just to make sure that you knew you had a little bit of an overhang or something that wasn't going to connect, and it's a great safeguard to make sure that everything is blended.
And because I ended up doing that, it does feel a bit heavy to me in this interior surface, like really close to the crown. So I'm going to go ahead and isolate the section and just take a few little baby bits of weight out here.
So going back to that freehand motion and just taking out a couple of bars or a couple of panels of deliberate slices, so nothing choppy or broken, just a real clean. And can you show us what you? Yeah.
Yes, let me do another one because I have another section here. This, when I started doing this, which was years ago, of course, I really got into the idea of taking out weight with the scissors because it's so clean. I don't know if you can, let me see if I can pull them out. And they're very, very, very invisible. So the idea is that the scissors have to be parallel to the direction of growth. Meaning if I went in like this and decided to take weight out, obviously I would take a big, nasty chunk out. So they basically face very parallel. Now, how much I angle the shears into the hair dictates how much of an impact I make. So I basically just do a little baby slither, and that's what ends up coming out, which you can see right here. You can see that?
Great. Yes. Yes.
Nice. Look, I mean, I know that there was such a minimal amount, but it made such a huge difference down here. When I combed all three of those sections together, it felt heavy in there. And now all of a sudden it can breathe again, and you can actually see all three sections individually. Like you can see through all three sections individually. So let's do that to the other side. And that is a technique that we do and that we've been doing for quite some time, this idea of weight removal to length. And I wasn't sure if I was going to do it with Lacey, but I'm still too concerned that what I have here is so skinny and weak that I actually do want to create strength by just cutting the outline first and then going back in secondary.
Beautiful.
It's hard to see, but down here it's so fine that I'm just literally softening that corner or really cutting off that corner. Blending in that corner. I like that better.
Yeah.
What are you doing, friend?
I'm watching you getting hypnotized by those scissors.
No, no, it sounds like you're cooking something back there.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to isolate this section again. This is where most of that weight lived. Another thing that I am cautious of, the diagonal line is shorter to longer, right? So my weight is also lower, higher, highest, similar to the outline of that line. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're staggering where you enter and where you exit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll take this little top corner. Some of these ends might and probably will get cut once I layer it. But I'm glad that I'm addressing the weight now so that I don't have to do it, at least not the stuff that's in the front part of the crown when I layer it. Just to show you those results. What I love about taking weight out, or in this case texturizing, is that because this is still going to be kept quite long, meaning the outline, you can actually see that little short interior bit is going to really help to give it more texture and have her natural wave come alive even more. Because when I did meet her earlier, and one of the things she did say is this front part gets pretty curly and this internal stuff doesn't. But this stuff now is actually going to get equally as curly, and it'll look like it does the same thing all the way around the head. I didn't even anticipate. Yeah, I didn't anticipate that, but now that I realize that is going to help the outcome and the way that it behaves for her, I'm really excited for that. So I haven't touched all of this. What I'm going to do is take a little bit of the stuff from the front and now take a true radial part from ear to ear and then layer everything else behind that. This will just give me a little bit of a visual for guides.
Yeah, you can really see the split from the front section that's already cut to the center panel that you're about to go into the layering.
Yes, yes, and yes. Okay, so this is the type of layering that we do quite often, whether you're using scissor, razor, whether it's long or short hair. It just works. 9 times out of 10, or probably 10 times out of 10, it always works for me. So I tend to revisit this a lot. Center section, about 1 inch wide, depending on the density. And again, I sectioned off what I've already done in the front to keep that separate for now. Now I have options here. I can either pull this straight back and cut it square here. I can also cut it off the rounds of the head, or I can cut it right 180 degrees to the opposite of where it lives and cut it to the top of her head, which makes the most sense to me because, remember, we're trying to keep as much length on her as possible. So by me pulling this length as far away from where it lives and deciding where I want this layer to live, that's going to allow for me to keep most of her length. And see, actually, a lot of that length just fell out, which is a good sign. This feels like a good place to me.
So your guide is you're choosing the length and you're pulling that straight up, and that existing length that's really long is what you're cutting off.
Yes, and just to show you where that lives on her, I think that's perfect. It still keeps all
that looks pretty.
And starts to layer the crown. So what I'm going to do here is just grab all of this in one big chunk because it's fine enough for me to control. If it was too dense still, then I can split this in half. I can split it in thirds, however many subsections I feel comfortable with. But I feel pretty comfortable dealing with the whole thing in one big chunk here. I just have to make sure that I get everything all the way to the center, and just to show you where I'm at. Now I am slightly over directing to the opposite side, so I'm not perfectly centered, but that's fine. That'll just save me more length. Which is about to fall out, so some of her length is falling out. I can see my guide on this side. And then I'm only lowering my elevation just to be able to make it easier.
Comfort.
To catch.
Great.
Just show you there's that side, which looks really good. So now I'm going to go back and re-find my center strip, because that's going to become my guide for the opposite side.
The movement looks so great, Nico.
Oh, good. Good, good, good. I'm excited. You know, I still have to decide if I want to take out some weight back here. But because these layers are brand new, I haven't seen Kelsey for quite some time, that her hair is really behaving quite differently. I really have to see this new shape put in before I make any internal decisions. I have one little knot. There we go. Couldn't get rid of. So, this idea of her having more density on one side than the opposite side continues to hold true here, because a moment ago, I feel like I just barely took off some length, and look at how much has to come off of that side. I mean, one of the good things that I'm happy about that this is happening is I'm actually getting a chance to rebalance the density on her head by just giving her this new haircut, right? So on that side, I trimmed it, and on this side, I really cut it, but now they're both the same. Both sides are the same. So she's going to feel a lot more balanced, or at least should feel a lot more balanced by the time that I'm done with this haircut.
Beautiful.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh. I do want to go in here and take a little bit of weight out, similar to what I did on that front stuff. So I'm actually going to take very similar sections. Remember, in the front, I took a diagonal section that followed and it went into the corner, the top corner. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll take a diagonal section that follows head shape. Save that stuff for a moment. Pull this straight out. This front stuff doesn't seem as dense as this back stuff, and it makes sense, and I'll show you why in a sec. Look, you can actually see the density here. It's quite solid, this subsection. So she can
Yeah, you can see the lightness and the darkness.
So I took slightly bigger chunks out, knowing that there's more density there, but you know, they're still quite invisible. It's not like they're chunks that she's going to notice.
Well, I also notice where you are on the head, and that is, you know, that right above the occipital is tends to be a little denser on most people, no matter what the texture. So you can afford to go in a little deeper there without it being recognized.
Yeah. So the subsection that I did underneath, that I said it's less dense up here, makes sense because this section sits over her shoulders. So a lot of times there's less hair here because you're dealing with the hairline right over the ear. But the section above that, which is the one I have in my hands right now, is dense. So I'm actually going to take one solid bit of weight out of that one so that it starts to air out right over the shoulders there. And now we're in the crown. Just going to take two little baby bits out of that. So let me marry this front to this back really quickly, just so you can kind of see, because I haven't really been marrying these yet.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Oh god. My what is that thing? My my speaker's friend are talking to us.
I couldn't hear any of it.
Oh, good.
Wait, who was it? Alexa?
Yeah. I keep putting my stuff down on top of her, and she's like, sorry, I didn't understand. Okay, so this is another really good visual. For whatever reason, it's flipped. The opposite side was denser in the inside and finer on the outside. Here, it's a lot finer on the inside. Do you see how I can see right through this section? And this is on the inside of her head. And it's denser on closer to the section right over her ear. But this is a perfect example of we never go on automatic pilot when we take out weight. You have, meaning I'm not going to just repeat what I did on the opposite side just because, you know, that's what I did. You take out the weight based on where it lives. And for whatever reason, on this side of her head, it lived on the outside corner, not the inside.
Yeah.
Just two little baby ones in here. Wasn't much. Now, even though I refer to them as little baby ones, or sometimes I say I took a bigger chunk, because I'm still angling the shears and controlling the weight removal, these are never bits that she's going to notice. And they're going to grow out nice and soft along with the rest of it. So they should still be relatively invisible, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm pretty much done. I do have one more thing to check and connect, which I'll talk to you about in a sec, but I just kind of want to show you how nicely this is coming alive.
And what are her plans for color?
Oh, you want to tell them, Lacey?
I think I'm just going to lighten it a little bit and bring the blonde up a little higher.
I see. Great.
The funny thing is, I told her, I was like, it looks so good. You don't even look like you need it colored, because the placement they did last time, and obviously it's it was done with painting, but as well as with this slightly ombre aesthetic where the roots are showing, right? But you can see how far away the blonde is from her root now, that stuff does need to be brought up.
Yeah, it'd be nice to freshen it up. It does look good. You know, sometimes you just want a little refresh.
So what I'm going to do lastly here is just double check to see how this front angle connects into this interior layer that I did, because I kind of did them separate from each other. And there is a bit of a disconnect that I want to bring together. So I don't know if you can see it here. There it is. So there's the front stuff. There's the crown stuff, and this little corner I'm actually going to blend right in, and for whatever reason it worked out perfectly in my favor. Now I am over directing this back to maintain length, and I'm also angling my fingers a little bit to also maintain length as well. So
just cut off that bit that doesn't connect,
yep.
But not change the angle of anything.
Yep. So then I'll do the same thing. I just have this little quarter panel left over her ear. Now remember, this is the side, I shouldn't say this ahead of time, but let's see if it all holds true. This is the side she has less density, and there was less hair for me to cut when I did that behind the ear, that I'm assuming there should be less hair here to cut when I do it in front of the ear. So let's see if that's true. Aha! All I have is that little corner. I don't know if you can see that, friend.
Just a little touch, barely.
Yes. So let me section this opposite side, and then we'll do the same thing. Now again, if my theory holds true in this case, there should be more hair to cut on this side, but let's see.
So this is kind of your version of like a cross check, right?
Yes. This is me making sure that the layer that I created in the back of the head matches everything in front of the head. So I am going to both over direct back and away to save as much length as possible. And look, there's a lot more hair here to cut than there was on the opposite side. You can see that, right?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. So I'm going to just bring it back to me so I can cut it. And I am doing the same point cutting technique that we addressed in the length line. And I never really talked about this, but I did hear you say this, the angle of the shears is so important. If I were to angle this straight up and down, which a lot of times we do with when we soften lines on dry hair, that's great. But I do angle the shears slightly in as well so that I get more hair to come off, basically.
More depth.
More depth, yes. Sorry. All right, I am done. Let's see if her natural, slightly off-center part comes through. There it is. It's so subtle. Actually, you haven't even seen this. There's a mirror. Look at that. You look so good. I don't know if you can see.
Great texture.
Much better.
So nice. Well, this is the other thing. She's lucky. Her hair air dries. You know, when I met her earlier, I asked her if she had curled her hair because it looks like it was curled. So she gets that perfect cool girl natural curl right around her hairline and everywhere else that all of us try and do with the curling iron, basically. She naturally gets it on her own. So she is lucky that that happens. And see, I'm so happy that this turned out as it did because I knew that she was a little concerned about losing too much length in the front, but I told her that it's only going to help to accentuate it. Look how beautiful this wave looks. And it just blends right into the length really nicely and on its own.
Great texture.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, friend, for product, which I might even do offline because I think I want to blow dry this for her to see it maybe finished, but I also want to try and take some photos of the natural texture. So I might do a little bit of both, but we will post these. But you remember, I already added 3 layers of product, 4 actually. Hairdress Invisible Oil Primer, prep at the root, the repair blow dry with the with the save the day, and then even more prep as I was cutting it on the very ends, right? She actually doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel like she needs product because it's behaving so nicely, but I am gonna add a little bit, and I'll do this while you're here, and then I might still blow dry this in. You know, this is one of my favorites for the summer because of the way that it behaves, because it'll encourage natural wave, and because it doesn't have the salt derivative, so it doesn't get as stiff in a sense. This still gives us the surf beach-like texture without the stiffness in a sense.
Surf leave-in.
Yep. So we'll do one application on this side. Anything that you need to see or comment on, friend? Am I good?
So just to be clear, you're going to hand style with the surf leave-in, take some photos, and then use a blow dryer and brush.
I think so, maybe. Depends on how good it looks once you style it.
That sounds great. So, all right, so we will look forward to those after photos.
Yeah, but look, even with just the surf leave-in, sorry, she's spitting on me, that you can see on that side, it's already starting to clump up these waves and really help to accentuate the haircut. Look at you look so good.
Very nice, very nice.
Well, thank you so much, friend. It was great having you with me. I always appreciate it.
All right, Nico, thanks for the great haircut. We'll look forward to those after photos, and everybody that tuned in live, thanks for watching us live, and those watching on the replay. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them on the Facebook page. And thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, everyone.